this is part 2 of our look at myths, ghosts, legends, archaeology, things that go bump in the night, generally the area of St. Nicholas in the Vale of Glamorgan. So what I'm going to do is get straight down to my wonderful annotation tools. So my annotation tool will come in as that there, and there you will find St. Nicholas. And you'll also find Bonvilston, and you'll also get an idea where we are. So there's Cardiff, there's Lantwick Major, there's Barry, so we know where we are. But the main area we're going to be looking at is going to be looking and focused on this sort of area here. We're going to be looking at several medieval sites, several prehistoric sites, and other things that go in between. So this is where we're going to go now. Del.
Yes.
Have you seen the burial chamber at Tinkinswood?
No, but I know where it is.
Oh God, not another one. So it's going to be pointless me asking you to point out on the map where the two medieval castellated mounds are. Yeah?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
I know where it is, but I've not actually been able to get to it yet.
Okay. Well, you know, that's not a problem. None of these are problems. So we looked at St. Nicholas a few weeks ago, quite some weeks ago. We looked at St. Lythans as well, quite some weeks ago. And I thought it would be just good to recap a little bit on St. Nicholas, and then so go on to detail about some other aspects of the landscape that will interest you. And there's one or two areas that I want us to look at today that I've mentioned, and people think, well, where are they? What is he talking about? So that's where we're going to go. So hopefully answer a few questions that you've got on the area tonight. So let's live and breathe. Now, the first building that we're going to actually look at, buildings, ain't so much ancient history, ain't so much haunted, but buildings that will be no longer with us in a few months' time. They're located at Sycamore Cross. If anyone knows the area, they're traveling from Cowbridge towards Cardiff on the A48. They will come across a crossroads that heads you north to Pendoylan along this road here, or leads you south towards Barry. And then you then head into St. Nicholas. So you've got some really nice oak trees on the left there. And if you just kept going down this road towards me, you will actually find some buildings dating from the Second World War. And it's always good to mix a little bit of history. So this is where we're going to go next. I usually park my car by here, actually. So where we're going to go next, if I get the cursor out, we're going to go to these buildings here. Now, so you go from Bonvilston, you'd either go to Barry, you go to Pendoylan, or you go to St. Nicholas and then through to Cardiff. And these buildings here are one set of two sets of buildings in the area, one a little bit further up the road. They're associated with Second World War prisoner of war camps. Now, we know that the Barry area, the Vale of Glamorgan, Bridgend, was full of Second World War prisoner of war camps. There were prisoner of war camps for Germans, Italians, and there were even one or two Russians kept in the area as prisoners of war when Russia was actually at war with us at the start of the war. And I'd like to mention this because these buildings will eventually be demolished. They are some of the last surviving remnants of Second World War structures in the Vale of Glamorgan. When I was a child, there used to be many such buildings associated with the Second World War. And we're going to look at only just briefly, that building and that building. This is known as Sycamore Cross. Now, here is completely full of housing now. This has all been built on. And obviously the development is going to move further. This is where the golf course is. They're not going to be able to build on here. But these buildings here are from the Second World War. And that there is basically a utility building with the heater in, the generator, the electricity, a building that the soldiers would be able to keep an eye on these two barrack block looking buildings. These are the only two left in that area. But as I say, there's a few further up the road. What are these buildings here? These are later buildings. But if you probably dig a little bit underneath the surface, you'll find a lot more buildings associated with the Second World War. And bringing in a theme of being spooky and odd and a sense of being haunted. When you actually go into these buildings, inside you can actually see some of the original light fittings. The original roof is still on the structure. The original metal frames, but without the glass. And there are two buildings there out of the whole complex. And it's going to be a great shame to lose these, as I'm told, in the aid of progress. But I don't think we should be knocking everything down. So looks rather spooky on a winter day. You go here and you almost hear echoes of Italian prisoners of war. This was an Italian prisoner of war camp. And after a while, the Italian prisoners of war were just were given a little bit more freedom than their German counterparts, because obviously by 1943, Italy had actually changed sides. Officers were kept in these buildings. This building itself, as I've already mentioned, the larger of the buildings, would actually be used to store the water, a generator, the heating system, and so on and so on. Some of the supplies, and there'd be one or two guards in here as well. Could actually be used as a small hospital block as well. And take you through some of these buildings. This is what they look like inside now. But what we do find inside is this is the one of the two, the really accessible one. This itself points towards the other building. It's rather overgrown, but the original roof timbers, the original roof, all asbestos roofing, and this itself is the ventilation flue. And you do actually see one or two of the original cables of the light fittings and the air ducts still within the buildings. Some of the windows are blocked up, but the original metal frames are still there as well. You know, I know people who have passed this building all their lives, and they've been asking me, where are these buildings? And you're just looking out there, and there's a metal frame. There's a little bit of a metal frame there. This door is gone. And I've always thought, if suddenly somebody gave me a load of money and they wanted to put it towards a portable museum or a museum for the Villa Morgan, these are the buildings that I would actually buy. And being that you've got a little housing estate there as well, we would naturally have a little bit of a market in trade already set up next door as well. But that's something else. Now, back to the nitty gritty. We're gonna, as I mentioned, we've got a little bit of prehistory. We do have some Mary Trevelyan stuff as well. But that's defo. And years ago, as things go, people come up to me and they say, I've got something in my field. Come and see it. And I used to not bother, but sometimes when people used to tell me, I used to go out and look. And this is a collapsed lid of a burial chamber, or a chambered monument, depending on which way you would like to call it. And this one is, strangely enough, In a field, it's over by here, near a place known as Tinnacoid Farm, where I actually worked for a little while helping the farmer. And it was strange, really, that I was brought to the notice of this chambered structure a good decade before I sort of started helping the farmer, really. And it was a rather interesting structure because nobody had ever seen it before. Well, nobody had actually ever remarked on it being a chamber. This is actually there in the field now, untouched. Some uprights, it looked very collapsed. And there it is again. I think these are actually, I dragged these off the internet today, and I actually think these are actually the images that I actually took years and years ago. And I actually had this monument scheduled and protected as a monument, but unfortunately a few years ago they withdrew their protection for it. But that slab itself is in at least about 5 or 6 tons in weight. Extremely hefty stone, probably more, and it's made of the local sedimentary rock from the area. And I thought I would do something also rather unusual, where I was just sort of talking about this going back to about 1993, when, you know, I was told about this stone. My granddad, who was a very important part of my early life, called Noah. Now, if it wasn't for Noah, I wouldn't have been able to tell you about St. Mary's Church at Cairo the other week, because he took me there, and he also took me to this monument. It's a rather strange monument indeed. This part of the Vale of Glamorgan has a number of strange mounds. Some of them have been described as Iron Age mounds. Others have actually been described as Norman mounds, or associated with the Norman occupation of the Vale of Glamorgan. What we do know is the line of the A48 is probably the line of a number of earthworks that were established by the Normans as they were encroaching into the area. But their real origins are very difficult to determine, in regards to the fact that most of them haven't really been archaeologically excavated. And my granddad used to take me to these sites, and he used to go drive us down long, windy little roads. And I used to say, "Granddad, we got to jump over the fence and go and look at that mound." So usually he would stay in the car, using a few F words, because my granddad swore like the best of them. And I would usually go and look at these mounds. I remember taking a few photographs of it back in the day. They haven't survived. But I've taken groups out there since, and it's a very hard monument to actually get to, really, because it's usually really badly overgrown. And what the site is, it's that central mound there in the middle is remarked to be about 40 meters in diameter. I've read other references to it being 60 meters in diameter, north to south. And that site itself is associated with those waves of knights coming into the area wanting some protection against those people that they hadn't conquered, those native people of Cymru that were still to be subjugated to Norman rule. And interesting enough, it was by about the 1090s that the area of this part of Glamorgan had been subjugated to the Norman rule. But the other thing to be said is that it took nearly another 200 years for the rest of Cymru to be conquered. So gives you a sense of the fact that we wanted to hold on to our independence for as long as possible. There are banks and ditches there about from the bottom of the ditch, which goes around it, to the height of the bank is about 2.5 to 3 meters in height. And it's really sort of easy to sort of miss it You wouldn't be able to pass it in the car and say there's like a monument there. But it's a good excuse when the bluebells are out, sort of maybe go out there bluebell picking. So this rather interesting site, again, it as it looks, if we go back, as it looks in a northerly direction, in a way, lots of these monuments are placed so they've got a command of the landscape, because that would look north, down the valley, and across the valley, and have an absolutely brilliant view. Because further south of this was the newly being founded Norman village of St. Nicholas, which would have a little bit of a role at the Battle of Cowbridge in 1404. But watch this space. And the road itself, if anyone's interested, you can jump out your car here, jump over the gates and fence and actually go into it. But the best way is actually to go across the fields and actually head to the site from the south. I'm just going to see what this message is that's come up. Picking bluebells is illegal. I wonder who mentioned that. John, shut up. So what I'd like to do is again look back at this monument and sort of give a sense of archaeological fact and archaeological bearing in the landscape. And you know, many people ask me, why don't I go out with a shovel and dig these places up? And I say, well, it's a scheduled protected ancient monument and you don't really need to dig it up because it's protected. And we think we know the date and we think we know about this site. But in great contrast is another point that I was asked last week. And it's sometimes good to have John's mic off when he's very skeptical of different things. Oh God, I've got Amy saying it's illegal to pick bluebells. You know, Del, right? If Jane said, go and pick me some bluebells, would you go and pick them?
Yeah, we got them in the garden and up my uncle's fields, so we can.
Good. But apparently it's still illegal, right? What about you, Soph? Would you pick some bluebells for good old Amy?
To be honest, I probably would, yeah.
Well, that's good then, because Amy objects as well. But Amy, I tell you what, Amy better get ready and have no resistance to strange things, because when we're doing that ghost walk on the 14th of August, Friday, she better be ready. And do you know what? We're starting off quite lightly tonight because it does grow. Last week, I was asked about ley lines. Somebody said, can you please look up ley lines for us? And I thought, yeah, all right. Because it was one of those bits of skepticism that John had. What are ley lines, he said. So what I've done, those are ley lines, and those are ley lines. And you can possibly find a ley line, right, between Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. Oh, hang on. The line ran out. That wasn't good. Between Tinkinswood Burial Chamber and St. Lythan's Burial Chamber. And you could say that's a bit of a ley line. And then what you could do is move this all the way down to the springs at Dyffryn. You've got another ley line. And then have a ley line to the river. You know, all these types of things could be classed as ley lines. But let's make a little bit more sense of it. Let's take in some wisdom from somebody who knows a bit more. And you know what? We also mentioned dowsing tonight as well. So now I found this little bit. I didn't want to go on Wikipedia, so I didn't. So what I did, I looked at history of ley lines. And there's a guy down here known as Alfred Watkins. Now, he's talking about ley lines in the 1920s. Alfred Watkins is a bit of an archaeologist, antiquarian, historian, jack of all trades, landscape photographer, and so on and so on. History of ley lines. Ley lines can also be spelled L-A-Y, or the two words are together. So different ways of looking at it. So people have often found special significance in the unusual landmarks and geological features surrounding them. High mountain peaks and majestic valleys may be viewed as sacred. For example, while deep, dark caves have often been considered the domain of the underworld. It's the type of place I'd like to place John. The same is true for roads. In the 1800s, on the British Isles, many people believed in mysterious fairy paths, ley lines. Trails connected certain hilltops in the countryside or ridges, or water sources, or rivers, or springs, or religious places like if you want to look at Llangffordd and link it via a ley line with Penrhys and the Lady of Penrhys, that's a ley line. And you can have a ley line between Avebury and Stonehenge. It was considered dangerous to walk on those paths during certain days, the spirit night days, 3 in the year, because the wayward traveller might come upon a parade of fairies who would not take kindly to human interruption. So if you know anything about Don't Follow Will-o'-the-Wisp, it's the same type of thing. Writers known as Philip KARL-JAMES and Richard Haygate described the origin of ley lines in their book of English Magic, whilst Alfred Watkins, a landscape photographer, that's the guy who said he was an antiquarian jack of all trades, in Herefordshire, noticed that ancient sites seemed to be aligned with others nearby. His idea was that our ancestors built and used prominent features in the landscape as navigation points. These features included prehistoric standing stones and stone circles, barrows, mounds, hill forts and earthworks, ancient moats, old pre-Reformation churches, old crossroads and fords, prominent hilltops, and fragments of old, woolly, straight tracks, even Roman roads. Watkins went on to suggest that the lines connecting these ancient sites represented old trackways or routes that were followed in prehistoric times for the purposes of trade or religious rites. And in 1921, he coined the term ley lines to describe these alignments. If anyone goes to Glastonbury, ley lines are big business, right? You know, I've been to Glastonbury many times, and I tell you do not disagree with people on ley lines. God, I was just about to say, as a scientific archaeologist, they exist. Okay, they exist. You've got a sense, you know, that you just can't argue and say no. But with that, I'm sure John would say, with that, you know, if anything's aligned, it can be classed as a ley line. And basically, is it just that? The one word that hasn't been used there, Sophie, is the word energy. Faults across the landscape, cracks in the earth crust, letting out gases, creating an alignment associated with a ley line, you know, spiritual energies, you could say enemies actually, religious energies and so on. And look at this. Wow. So these are some of those ley lines. This is the big one, yeah, from 9 to 5, which we'll go on to in a minute. So you've got Glastonbury Tor aligned with standing stones on Anglesey. Castlerig aligned with standing stones in Dorset. And you've got Glastonbury Tor in the heart of all this, leading everywhere. So this is what we're talking about, you know, these ley lines. I actually saw, there was somebody having an argument online. It was saying, well, ley lines, you only get ley lines in England and Wales. And somebody said, no, you bloody don't. You get them in Scotland. The English don't own ley lines. We've got ley lines as well. And then somebody comes out into the argument, well, the Scots don't just have ley lines. We've got ley lines in Ireland. And, you know, it just gets a really silly argument, to be honest with you. But look at this one, that very special one. So without dismissing this, right, let's just take it carte blanche. Right, so what we've got KARL-JAMES, which leads to St. Michael's Mount, which lots of people have heard of St. Michael's Mount. It's a little bit of a rocky outcrop with a castle on it, and it's the place where a 7-foot giant's buried. And then you go, what's that?
I just said, oh, there. Like, I realised where you were talking about.
Yeah, shh. You know what I mean then. So there you go. We go to the Holy Well of St. Austell, and we go to Lostwithiel. I love Lostwithiel. It's a lovely place. Then it goes to Cadbury Castle. Then you've got another St. Michael's. And then you go to places that you may not have heard of. Boroughbridge Clump. Glastonbury, you've heard of that one. Oliver's Castle, Avebury, you've heard of that one. Hampstead Hories. Sydenham Castle. I'm not sure I've come across that at all. Bury St. Edmunds, which is a very weird place. Mind you, anything in Norfolk's weird. And then you've got a place known as Hopton. And directly, you could go there on May Day sunrise and see all these things lined up. Let's move on. Am I a believer? I've got to say that I've got to believe these things, because naturally, Amy, what type of ghost guide would I be if I didn't believe in these things? Sophie, you would never trust me again. So they are real. Nobody's saying a word. Right, anyway, what I'd like to do, we've had a little bit of a stab at these ley lines, but we've got something really unusual coming up, right? So if I turn to my little page here, right? And this leads us into something very strange. So before we finish this, just for John, right? John, there is definitely a spiritual ley line between St. Lythan's burial chamber and Tinkinswood. I feel it. I know it's there, okay? I did sleep at Tinkinswood burial chamber. And you know what they say about people who sleep at Tinkinswood burial chamber? I will come on to it. So, something really weird. So if we look at the name St. Nicholas, and we think, St. Nicholas, what is St. Nicholas? What does that mean? I immediately thought, oh, right, okay, what is St. Nicholas about? And you could refer to St. Nicholas fire or St. Nicholas lights. In the same way, you got St. Elmo's fire, which I thought was a nice little bit of a link. St. Nicholas, patron saint of sailors and the sea, so that's the link. And I just thought, what is this? So from old descriptions from the 1700s, St. Elmo's fire, not the others. St. Elmo's fire. And what would happen is on the rigging, on the masts, on the end of the mast, there would be usually bits of metal. And the way this would work is that this would create some sense of an electromagnetic field. And going by this, those electric illuminations of phosphorescent gleams that are sometimes seen playing around the masts and rigging of ships were called by old Welsh sailors spirit candles, which is slightly different from what they should mean. So the spirit candles, the candles of the Holy Ghost, or the candles of St. David. And you know that if you see these, it's a warning potent telling you of your own death. So you're going to die in 3 weeks' time or something. But to sailors, it's going to mean something else. And were sometimes known by the English as corpo sants. These weird lights are known by the Italians and lots of other sailors as St. Elmo's stars, or St. Elmo's fire, or St. Elmo's lights, that the French and Spanish would refer to them, and obviously what we'd refer to them. So the Russians, in their sense, St. Nicholas and St. Peter's lights. When two illuminations appeared, they were regarded as tokens of fair weather and prosperous voyage. One solitary illumination was a bad omen. Many lights seen suddenly in a storm indicated an early calm or that the worst of the storm had passed. Now, that's the one I was going to say. If you see lots of lights bouncing off a ship or in a storm, just as the storm's reached its height and going down, you know that the storm's going to end. If it's really calm, away from like slightly the text, if it's really calm and you see lots of lights, it means it's warning you of very stormy conditions to come. So be very aware of St. Elmo's fire. And there it is. Actually, I think that's the other way around, isn't it? That looks quite bizarre. Now that looks more like it. St. Elmo's fire, lush, love it. Do you know what? I thought it's about time I tell you about snakes. And snakes in the Vale of Glamorgan, and snakes from the type of land that we're going to be looking at. So here we go. So I'm going to make sure I get my snakes. It's not there. Hang on a minute. Oh, there's my snakes. I've got lots of notes here tonight when we get to the burial chamber. Right. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been on my walks and heard me talk about snakes. But I thought with the landscape that we've got in the Vale of Glamorgan, particularly like St. Nicholas, because it's in the heart of the agricultural belt of the Vale of Glamorgan, St. Nicholas, Bonvilston, and St. Livins. Saintly, well, here we go. In some parts of the Principality, there were formerly a tradition that every farmhouse had two snakes, a male and a female. They never appeared until just before the death of the master or mistress of the house. Then the snakes died also. So if you ever saw one snake, you're okay. If you ever saw two snakes and you were the master of the house, Del, you're going to die. It's just a warning, okay? It's fine. Don't worry about it. Do you know, I don't like my brother, right? He was bitten by an adder this year, and I had a good old laugh. Oh, that's cruel, isn't it? Right, anyway, a small fiery viper, so called because it was very venomous, used to be found in various parts of the Vale of Glamorgan and Wales. According to tradition, only two of these were alive at the same time. For soon after their birth, the young vipers would eat up their parents. Which I think is quite a strange little story, to be honest with you. The healing power of snakes appears to have been remarkable. And let's go into a little bit of a story, shall we? Here we go. A farmer's son in the Vale of Glamorgan suffered from a skin affection, or affliction, could be. The irritation and pain frequently led him to seek seclusion by the riverside. May I add, there's a story like this associated with Lantwick Major and St. Donat's, so look it up. But it involves a little girl. There one day, the boy took a short nap in the dinner hour, while his companion, one of the farmhands, enjoyed his noontide meal. As he ate his noontide meal, and he looked at the farmer's son, he saw a snake coming from the hedge to the farmer's son. The workman, instead of rousing his young master, watched the snake's movements and carried on eating. It's the type of thing I would do, actually. No, it's not. But if it was my brother, I would. Presently, the reptile glided close to the sleeper's face and appeared to be examining the skin. Now, I hear this with lots of stories associated with snakes in the Vale of Glamorgan. They don't bite unless you're my brother. Then the creature glided slowly back to the hedge and ate some herbs and grasses. It's quite strange for a snake to be doing that. The snake then returned and gently as possible emitted its saliva over the young man's face. So you're the guy eating your dinner thinking, I think I'm smoking wacky backy at this stage. I know I would be, smoking a wacky packy anyway. This disturbed the sleeper, but the workman, having heard something about the healing power of snakes, begged his master to remain quite quiet. So can you imagine the conversation, Del, right? You know the snake by your face, yeah? Let it lick you and continue. Can you imagine a conversation? For, the farmhand said to his master, the farmer's son, and rubbing an ointment on your face. By and by, the snake went away. So when he says, I'm rubbing an ointment, he's referring to the snake. But, you know, the farmer's sons thinking he's just dreaming all this. The workman did not say a word about the reptile later. But in the course of the week, the painful skin affection vanished and never again reappeared. When completely cured, the young farmer asked the workman the name of the ointment that had wrought such a cure. Then the man described what he had seen, to the astonishment of everybody. The herbs and leaves eaten by the snake were never discovered. But it does actually say in this bit of the story that he's collecting herbs and grasses. But I think he's saying that we don't know what herbs and grasses they were. So this cured the little boy. Well, it cured the boy from the skin of, what did he say? Affection. Should be affliction there, but skin affection. I'm all right with that one. So that's a very strange one, that one. Del?
Yep.
You know, I got sores on certain parts of my body, right? Do you think I should lie in the grass naked and allow a snake to lick those parts with its saliva to cure them?
Why not? I'm sure Michelle would have a good laugh, and your brother.
You bastard. Right, okay. Right. So what I'd like to do now, I would like to go to the Place de Resistance, the burial chamber. Now I know those guys, right? That woman's got really freakish hair, and that guy works for the Royal Mail. Now we're at St. Linda's burial chamber. This is the Place de Resistance. But we've got a few things left. This is number six on my list today, but I've got a few things left. So I'm just I've got this to read out here. So if I was doing a headline, if I was at the burial chamber, and I would be telling people about it, and then, you know, we'll go back over what this says here. So this is what I would say. One of my little thought cards about St. Nicholas Tinkinswood burial chamber. And if you look at the spelling of Tinkinswood, it's not one word today, it's two words. It's Tinkies, separate word, wood. Now it's one word. So I was just thinking I wanted to look that one up. So anyway, the three days of the year, May Day, 1st of May, and then you got St. John's Day or Summer Solstice Eve, which is going to be the 20th or 21st or whatever time of year it is. And then you got Mid-Winter's Day, which is going to be like usually the 20th of December, yeah? And if you sleep at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, the one thing I say to people, you either die, go mad, or you turn into a poet. Well, this burial chamber's had a really weird effect on me, as I've said time and time again. So moving on from my very dear friends, these group once, when I was when I was going through a period of women, there was this one woman that well, we won't go into it, but I thought I've had enough of this. Anyway, I packed my bags and left, and I never saw her again. Anyway, that a day later, I went to the burial chamber. I felt really good about myself, and I felt so good about myself that I bought loads of food and drink and a pop-up tent. And I had a group of people at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, and I fed them all, and they all had a drink and everything, and we had a really good time. I remember that. That was great. That was in 2012, actually. And I would say that this is a very strange site, because I've spoken to people about dowsing in regards to this site. And the dowsers tell me that, quite specifically, the archaeologists found this out in about 2009, I think it was, when they were excavating there. They found out that that capstone was dragged from a few meters away from a quarry. But a dowser had told me years earlier that he had worked out where the stone came from, the specific place where the archaeologist said the stone came from. We didn't know at that point. And the other thing as well is that at this place, it almost feels like it's a bit of a vortex, and dogs don't like to go there. So that's a rather interesting one to remember, that dogs don't like going there. And Amy, it's doing it again. Yes, it's doing it again. I need to resist certain things, Amy. Amy knows what I'm talking about. I know a local guy who's a Wiccan. I don't follow the path of being a Wiccan. But he's a guy by the name of Peter Nash, a guy by the name of Peter Prothero. And he said to me that he went there by himself this one day, and he's like a high sort of like priest of the Wiccan movement. Anyway, he said to me that he went there and he said he felt that there was footsteps behind him and a sound of breathing behind him, even though there was no one there, which is really strange. You can get that sense. Oh, Amy, it's passed, thank goodness. So the other thing as well is you should whisper your wishes into the stone. And I think I mentioned this with St. Lythans. When you go to these burial chambers or underground, you need to obtain your sense of being inside these monuments. And you need to find ways of talking into the stone, usually via holes in the stone. And you tell them your problems, and you whisper your pain, and you tell these holes your anger. And when you're in that situation, it always seems to work. God, I felt I was going off on one then. And a few other things as well is it's known as Castell Carreg, which is the stone castle, but it's also could be referred to as Castell Carregan, which doesn't sound like grach, which is the Cymraeg word for witch, but it could refer to as witch's castle. And the names for St. Lythans have got various different names. And interesting enough, just a little bit of a parallel. When you go to the names of St. Lythans, which we visited, which is a kilometre away, they refer to the stone as Llech, but here they refer to the stone as Carreg, which is another name for stone. So they use the two different forms of stone for the two different sites, which I think is rather interesting. That's a rather interesting one there. To be reminded as well, and I may be reminded that I need to get off this image now. Right, good. I'm also reminded that this is a place where, known as the place of the red caps. Apparently, if you go there at certain times of the day, not certain times of the year, but certain times of the day, you can see little figures playing on the top of the big capstone, which is about 50 tons in weight, which was removed from the quarry nearby and placed on top of this. Amy, can you chuck a little bit of cleansing out there for me, please? So I would like to mention a couple of things before I mention what Mary Trevelyan's saying about St. Nicholas. I think there's, I probably need to edit this as I'm reading it, actually. There's something that I think she's got mixed up with St. So if you get out your car, you can, so the car, you park your cars here. Parking space for about 5 cars, 6 at the most. And then if the trees in the winter are down here, you could sort of see the chamber in the distance. If you do the proper route, which is the footpath route, you go down here and you can't see it. You can't see it. You just can't see the burial chamber. You're in a valley. You can't see it. There is actually a little bit of a spring here that you go over, a little bit of a bridge. And you just cannot see the burial chamber. And the very strange thing is that as you enter the field here, you still can't see the burial chamber. And if there's a bit of a mist, you cannot see the burial chamber until you're more or less upon it, which is quite strange. Oh, if you look into the bushes here, which is usually ignored, there's lots of stones standing, and that's the quarry there. And actually, if you're very lucky and the hedge is down and it's the winter, there's another burial chamber standing in the field, which very few people get to see. Very people know it's there. Moving on a little bit further. Unfortunately, the site is not treated with the respect that it's deserved, to be honest with you. And it drags bizarreness, right? About 2 years ago, there was an article in the Barry Gem, and it was about a couple that had taken about 4 bin bags of rubbish from their house in Penarth. They had driven all the way up to the burial chamber, and they chucked all their rubbish in the burial chamber and set light to it. And you think, why? Surely if they want to burn their rubbish, they could take it somewhere a little bit more secluded and get rid of it that way. But no, they took it all the way to the burial chamber. It's a very strange place. The first time I slept there, which was the 30th of June, in the year 1995, I slept in there with a female friend of mine. We didn't do anything. It's a bit of a weird one, actually. She'd been on a walk that night with me, and I said, oh, do you want to stay here the night? And we did, but just don't go there. Anyway, so it was 1995, and we slept in there. And my head went, actually. And then, strangely enough, as we slept, somebody was playing the didgeridoo on top of the burial chamber at 12 o'clock at night. And it was a very strange thing, hearing a didgeridoo. And then, weirdly enough, I gave the guy my business card, right? And he's called Alex. And I gave him my business card. And the weirdest thing ever, about 4 years ago, this guy contacted me. He kept my business card in his wallet. His business card in his wallet for basically 20 years. Can you believe it? And he contacted me. I couldn't believe it. It's very strange what this site does to you. And I've told you the other time about the haunting that I've seen there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn to our Mary Trevilian. So here we go. And yeah, we got, just sort of get an idea. There's the quarry. It's herringbone style. That's it from above. So we've got the herringbone was reconstructed by the archaeologist Ward in 1914 to indicate the areas that he rebuilt, and the flat areas below that are the actual original stones. Those stones at the rear there of the main chamber, they were taken out of that hole, and that was like a kiss burial where they found more graves, and this is it. Dyffryn, near St. Nicholas in the Vale of Glamorgan, has druidical stones scattered about in various places. Some of these have stories attached to them. Old people in the middle of the 1800s said that once a year, on Midsummer's Eve, the stones in Mysophellin Field whirled round 3 times. But unfortunately, what she's talking about there is actually St. Lythans. So she's not talking about St. Nicholas. So the St. Nicholas bit is here. The stones in Tinkin's Wood, some distance away, but belonging to the same druidical scene, were said to be women turned into stone for dancing on Sunday. Said you shouldn't dance on a Sunday, you'll be turned into a stone. The Great Cromlech in Dyffryn Woods was an unlucky place to sleep in and on one of the 3 spirit nights, as I mentioned, May, June, and December. For the person who did so would die, go raving mad, or become a poet. And there's another one that you'll go into the past. Or if you're like me, you go into the future and your head goes, isn't that right, Amy? These stones were haunted by the ghosts of druids who were in the habit of punishing wicked people by beating them, and were particularly hard in their treatment of drunkards. A man fond of drink slept there one night, and his experiences were terrible. Terrible beyond description. He declared the druids beat him first, and then whirled him up to the sky, from which he looked down and saw the moon and stars thousands of miles below him. Strange, that description. This comes from about 1850. The druids held him suspended by his hair in the mid-heaven until the first peep of day, and then let him drop down to the Dyffryn Woods, where he was found in a great oak by farm labourers. Doesn't that sound great? Do you know what? There's a little bit more here, but we need to go to that place to do it. Give you a few facts. They found 1,000 odd bones in this site, excavations in 1914 and 2009. They believe that the bones represent the remains of about 50 people. There's an archaeologist from Orkney University, known as Professor Colin Richards. He believes that these chambers were only used in their last period of use, the last 50 years, for burial. And for the previous hundreds of years, they were used for something else. Interesting, that. The bodies found were all sexes and ages. And when it was sealed up, that little hole in front there, just peeping through, because there was a stone on this side, it's no longer there because they removed it to get access to the chamber. But that was eventually blocked up. But it was reopened every now and again. And people are still visiting this site in the Roman and medieval period, leaving offerings, votive offerings, in the Christian age. As we come to the end now, let's see where we are. 2 little things left to see. We've seen that's the back of the burial chamber, or the chamber, and that's the little quarry. And what you can see is that there is the ground level, and that there is the floor level. So what they've done, they've measured the thickness of the top there to the bottom, and they worked out that directly relates to the thickness of the stone at the chamber. Two other facts, just mentioned that. You've seen that. So point out a couple of things out if anyone visits there. That's the main chamber. That's the little thing at the back, the hole at the back where they left the stones on the surface to indicate that they removed from the hole. Years ago, there was an avenue of stones. They believe that there was an avenue of stones leading all the way through, maybe all the way to St. Lythans. That would be a ley line, John. Just winding you up. And over here is that quarry. So the stone was moved between 50 and 100 meters to create the top of the capstone where you see it today. Let's see where we are now. Not long. What I'd like to do next is look at a little bit of a curio for all of you. Del, when you're driving along the A48 and you've just passed the turning for Barry, you go along here and then it's got a sign. It says slow down to 40. It's got the little entrance there. If you maybe park by here, go across the road. I wouldn't advise it. You see a stone, a standing stone, which originally was believed to have been further up on the ridge. I'm not sure about that, you know. It looks quite a home where it is. There's the stone there. It's just poking out. You can just see the shadow. Used to be thought there was around here, but I don't think it's ever been moved, really. There's a bit of a pond there as well. Very strange, that. Maybe I'm saying that it's all linked, the water and the stone. There is the stone itself. All by itself, echoing from times past. And you know those times past? The last little readout from Mary Trevelyan. Here we go. Standing stones, supposedly of druidical origin or memorial origin, are seen Glamorgan near Cottrell, south of the Cottrell golf course. We've got another mound to look at there just before the end. The story about these stones is that some women had sworn falsely against an innocent man who was put to death on the gallows at Bryn Owen Mountain, subsequently known as the Stalling Down, where the old fish restaurant used to be. The fish restaurant there, the old Mulligans, and it was a Bryn Owen, have now closed now. They've gone through. So, Amy, you won't be able to buy a drink there now anymore on my walks. These women were turned into stone on their way home to Cardiff or St. Nicholas. And this is one of those women. Must have been a big woman. Moving on. And last, but not least, is this. On the golf course at Cottrell is another one of those mounds. We don't know anything about it, really. It's another Norman mound. It's like an old Welsh lady's hat. Times change, folks. There used to be a very deep ditch around it years ago that I can remember. But now there's no longer a deep ditch around it. And the monument is, alas, very difficult to work out and find. It's in the centre of the golf course, may I add. And what we then find is, as we move on, it's basically within the snow. There it is. There it is. You can't really see much. And there's the mound. It's there are various estimates at its height, but its height has been lessened. And now it's very, very difficult to find unless you've got somebody with you. I have taken a group of people there and we didn't find it, but I think the last time I went there I actually found it. It's very difficult to find, actually. It's also a scheduled ancient monument. Is it Norman? Actually, folks, we don't really know. It could actually be a prehistoric monument. Like some of the others of these monuments have been re-identified as being Norman when they've been a lot earlier. And if anyone's going there, they will find it. You'll find the entrance there. So Del, after you've seen the stone, which is there, drive all the way down here. They won't stop you, right? leave your car by there, gather all the way over there, you've got a mound. Job done. Take this aerial view with you, and you'll be able to get to it. So, I do believe that may actually be the last image today, and I do believe it is. So, what I'm going to ask Del, are there any questions? And you know what? We've precisely done an hour, amazingly enough. Would you like to say anything, Del?
Oh, that was really interesting. You know, as I've said, when you do that area around the Cowbridge area, between Cowbridge and Cardiff, it's an area I've driven down many times, but not really explored. So that really, you've sort of given this thing in my head now that I've got to go there and have a look.
Well, isn't that what? Yeah, go on.
Thanks.
No, it's my pleasure. Isn't that what I'm here to do? That's what we've got to do, all of us. Go to these places. And what about you, Sophie Babes? Whilst I look at my phone and see what the wonderful Ellen has said to us. Go on, speak, Sophie.
Yeah.
Forever hold your peace.
Yeah, really interesting. I definitely understand ley lines a lot more now, because previously I had no idea what they were really. But that was really interesting, yeah.
And you know what? I've just looked at my phone, and somebody had actually booked online about 7 o'clock, and they were meant to join us. Christ.
Oops.
Oops. Unfortunately, when you join a bit late, oh God, that's really, really bad, that one. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to check something a minute, folks. Yes, I got the text at 7:36, which is a bit of a shame. God. Oh God, we'll have to talk about what to do with that one now. And Ellen says to us all, she says, I am so sorry, but I am having to miss today. I have had such a busy week. Hope that is okay. And yes, somebody did go to join us tonight, which is a bit of a shame. Oh God. Would you all mind, folks, if it's really too late now, isn't it? But I'll have to do something with her. I will. What we're going to do, I'm going to stop the sharing now. Just delayed a minute, because I'm just thinking, if that person is still waiting, she could just catch us at the end and see if there's any questions. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So if you're all okay with that, folks, all hang on a moment. And if I forward this to her now, and she might be able to join us at the very end now. So I'm just going to post that, and we'll do this now. Oh, can't keep everybody happy all the time. It's the first time this ever happened like that, actually. It's never happened before. We used to have ghost walks, and people used to book about a couple of minutes before it started, and they would just turn up and they would say, we've just paid. It would be very frustrating. Anyway, so I'm just double checking something. Right, okay. So, okay, folks, let's put the mics on, and we're going to stop sharing. If anyone would like to say anything, then everyone can put their... John, keep it sensible, please. So, right. Gillian, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I really enjoyed this tonight. I haven't been to St. Lythans, and can you tell me exactly where the stones are on the A48? Because I couldn't quite work it out where they are, the standing stones.
Right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the sharing again. Go back to the sharing, and we will... Hang on, if we go to... And anyone else who's got a question on this map, right, you need to shout out now, because...
Are they on the left as you go to Cardiff, or on the left as you're coming away from Cardiff?
I can't say anymore until I get my annotation bar on. You know I love drawing. So there's the road to Barry. This is the A48 to go into Cardiff from Cowbridge.
Ah, right, okay.
Okay,
So-
so what we've got, you've got the entrance to Cottrell Park.
Yeah.
And if you park, right, I'm not going to advise you park there. I'm not going to advise you cross the road. But if you did manage to get to the other side, well, actually, the best thing to do would be to drive up here, turn around, drive along here, and then you'll be able to maybe park your car on the verge. And it's basically, you've got the entrance to the park here. And as just a little bit further over, there's that stone. And if you look up on the hill, you can see another burial chamber on the hill.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I've got that now.
Bingo. Right. Anything? Would you like to say anything else before Amy says something?
No, but it was great, Carl. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And what about you, John, babes? Well, Amy first. Go on. Amy, there's your doll.
Yeah, Gloria.
A doll with one eye. That is really spooky. I was really spooky. Amy,
Yeah.
Did you probably gravitate? I was just about to lose it with a Tinkerswood thing, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. I'll discuss that with you on staff talking after everyone's gone.
Okay. And what about you, John?
Well, I can't say as I warm to the doll, having got a granddaughter that sadly has only got one eye. So, yeah, I mean, if she was here, I don't think it'd be very nice to see, or anybody else that was in the same boat, would they really? But, yeah,
Oh, come
very
on, John,
educational.
come back to the lecture. Come in sensible, John.
I just did.
All right. Okay.
Right, I got nothing else to say. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So have you all enjoyed it tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Have you enjoyed it, John?
Yes.
Good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. If you do Wednesday, and obviously the lectures in the week. So I'm gonna tell you Wednesday. Wednesday we got various stories, myths and legends of Wales, and we will be looking at myths and legends of Wales that are actually real, like Gelert, and various things like that. And then obviously the lectures of the week will be the archaeology of the collapse of Easter Island. So there we go.
Good.
So what we're going to do, I thank you for your support tonight, and it's been a pleasure. So I will have a chat with Amy now, and good night, Jill, Sophie, babe, John, babes, Del, and
Yeah. Good night, all.
Good night.
good night, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Bye, all.
Cheers. Night, guys. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you,
Bye.
Soph. Soph's wonderful glasses.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
Night.
It's a 4-eye moment. You need to get some glasses as well, eh?
Well, I've got glasses.
All right. Do you have glasses? All right.
right, give me a sec. My computer's being weird. I will leave you eventually.
Oh, don't worry. You two have a chat while I just check something.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I just it was weird. We had this booking coming in at oh God, Amy, you had the booking coming in at 6 o'clock. Christ.
Oh,
6 o'clock.
oops.
Anyone we know, or
No, no, the name's not familiar, but it could have been.
what's the name?
The name is Mina. So yeah,
Don't know any meaner.
Mina. So I tell you what we'll do. I'll stop the recording there, right? And